Welcome to Real Love, Real Stories, the podcast, a place where couples share their love stories. This is Kanu, and I am the host. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're listening to episode 1. And in this episode, I am talking to Terry and Rosalie. Enjoy their love story. The podcast is about real love, real stories. And so I want to hear your story about, first of all, let's start with how long have you guys been together?
We've been together for about 16 months.
16 months, okay. And so this is 16 months in a relationship, but what about total? Like, how long have you known each other?
We've known each other for probably about 2 decades.
2 decades. Okay, that's actually a perfect segue into my next question is, how did you both meet?
Oh, well, as it turns out, Rosalie was once upon a time married to my brother. So,
yes.
We met when Rosalie married my brother at my mother's house.
Oh.
If I'm recalling correctly.
Is that about right, Rosalie?
No, but it was close. It wasn't exactly that day. I mean, that sounds like super awesome and scandalous, but we actually met in 1997 we met. And then I got married a couple years later at your mom's house, correct?
Okay.
Oh, so you met him, was it right at the time of the wedding or somewhere around then?
We met a couple years before that. He lives in Michigan, and me and my ex-husband, we lived in California. So we would come out and visit like a couple times a year, I think. So I probably have met Terry, a couple of times. It's not like we were very well acquainted. The wedding, we met a little bit before the wedding, I guess I would say.
Oh, okay. So maybe we should put a little bit of context into this. Like you said, it's not as scandalous as it sounds. So maybe speak to a little bit about, obviously you were married to his brother and now you two are together, but can you put a little bit of context as to what happened there a little bit?
Well, I can speak to that a little bit, I think. I think Rosalie can help to flesh this story out. But my brother is largely estranged from my family.
Okay.
By his choice. And so when he and Rosalie parted ways, we had known about that here in Michigan, but hadn't really stayed particularly close.
Okay.
Of course, had I known Rosalie better at the time, probably would have made more effort. But as it turns out, they had a parting of ways, and then Rosalie sort of lived her life in California. I lived my life in Michigan. Mm-hmm. We didn't meet again for many years later when Rosalie found me on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm going to bring my kid to Michigan to meet some family members. Can you kind of help me out a little bit with that?" And I said, "Absolutely." And then we just started chatting from there, and things kind of grew.
Oh, I love it.
In the meanwhile, I guess I should add to this story that in the meanwhile, I became divorced from my wife as well. That's been about 6 years ago.
Oh, gotcha. So it was around the time. So when Rosalie was married to her first husband, you were also married to somebody else.
That is correct.
And then the divorces kind of happened close together there, maybe a couple year difference or something.
Yeah, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago for me, and Rosalie, 13 or something like that?
13.
Okay. Rosalie, anything you want to add to that? I always like to hear, from the guy's perspective and then from the lady perspective. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that Terry has it pretty accurate. We were just kind of living our lives separately, but we had always had I probably had a more friendly, warm relationship with my in-laws than I did my husband, it turns out. So There was one brother in particular out of the family that I kept in touch with and was very close to, and he passed. And so when I saw Terry on Facebook a couple years later, I have fond memories of my in-laws, and I always got along fine with Terry. And when we connected, I didn't know he was single. It wasn't one of those kind of I wasn't reaching out for any reason other than, hey, like, let's catch up. It's been a long time.
Right.
And then when we started catching up, it was like, we just have a lot of things. I don't know if I'd say in common, but we have a lot of similar, I don't know if it's quirks or there was just a click that I wasn't expecting. And I don't think Terry was expecting either.
Oh, that's so cool. So I like how you started talking about the in-laws and stuff. So can you speak to a little bit about how did the family handle that, right? Because you divorced one brother and now you're dating the other brother. So usually, I can only imagine, but usually that doesn't go quite well. But I would love to hear from you. Like, what was that like?
Well, what I can say is, luckily for me, much of Terry's family is kind of estranged from each other.
Oh, okay.
So we have a couple of sister-in-laws that know, and they've been like, 2 thumbs up, really cool about it. And then of course we have some common nieces, which makes things a little funny. And they've been very supportive. And then I have 2 daughters, and they just think Terry's super cool. And he has 2 daughters that I don't know if they think I'm super cool, but they definitely seem to be tolerating the situation okay.
That's awesome. So what do you mentioned you both have kids, from your previous relationships. So what do they call your kids, Rosalie? What do they call Terry? And then Terry, what do they call Rosalie?
Well, this should actually this should entertain a few people. My kids, because they both are very cheeky and they have my sense of humor, they call Terry Uncle Dad. which Terry seems to enjoy greatly. So.
Uncle Dad, I like that.
My kids just call Rosalie Rosalie. I think that's their comfort level. So
yeah,
that's what they have adopted.
What do you have any terms of endearment for each other?
Terms of endearment, probably the typical stuff like babe and darling.
Yeah. Is that the same, Rosalie? Is that the same for you? You call him darling?
Excuse me. I'm not quite as fluffy in that regard. I do. I think we are like the typical. He's right. Nothing out of the ordinary. Babe, honey, that kind of thing. I am not super creative when it comes to that stuff, so I just pick up whatever in the vernacular and go with that. But
okay. And then I wanted to find out, what is the one quality that you like about the other partner? Like, Rosalie, what do you like about Terry? And Terry, what do you like about Rosalie?
Oh, that's easy. She's completely fearless. Nothing phases her, and anything I suggest, she's like, yeah, we can do that.
That's awesome. I love it. What about you, Rosalie?
Well, I think I probably like the fact that he is more grounded and more practical than I am. So I am the one that says, sure, let's do it. Let's go for it. Or I'll suggest things. And Terry's more like, let's take a pause and let's think about, let's act like adults for a minute. And so it's kind of a good balance to my, I'm ready to do anything at a moment's notice. And he has that in him, but he likes to kind of be a little more practical. And it's probably good for me that he is that way. But he's also very playful, and he's very tolerant of my crazy behavior and my weird notions. And so I think he's very patient.
Oh, that's, you know what? That's one thing that a lot of people are lacking. I know I'm lacking in that area. I'm not very patient. So kudos to you, Terry.
She keeps accusing me of that I'm faking it well so far, I guess. So
That's great. That's great. So, on the flip side of that, what is the one annoying quality about each other that you put up with that you probably wouldn't put up with each other if you were not so in love?
well, we haven't discussed Rosalie's penchant for changing the radio station every 5 seconds. Um, but that's one thing that we probably need to have a discussion about in the future.
That's awesome. What about you, Rosalie?
Well, now I'm going to feel like a jerk because mine's actually a little bit more intense than the radio station, which is completely made up, by the way, because you don't let me touch the dials. So I don't know where that's coming from. What I would say about Terry is that the one thing that is a challenge for me is that I'm very unregimented. I just kind of go with things, and he has a structure in his life and it makes sense, and it's what you would see with someone who's been a bachelor for a number of years. And God bless him, I come to visit, and I'm always nervous that I'm leaving like a mess behind me because he's very clean and orderly, and it's a wonderful quality, but it drives me batshit crazy.
Which, and I wonder how that's going to be when you actually are living together full time versus, I don't know how often you go visit or he comes to visit. So I wonder what that's going to be like when you're like actually living together full time.
I think he's going to loosen up a little bit.
And he's patient, like you said, right?
Right. Absolutely.
There you go. So, what would you say is one of the secrets to, your relationship? Like what makes it successful? And think about the people that might be listening. Like what advice would you have to people in regards to how a relationship should work?
Well, I think we've been kind of making it up as we go along so far. But what's really worked is that both Rosalie and I think, if I can speak on her behalf briefly, is we have a very strong position of being non-judgmental. It doesn't mean that we're going to always agree with what the other person says,
right?
But we will not accuse anybody of some moral wrongdoing for having a certain type of feeling or position on something. And it's really a matter of, I'm willing to accept her 100% how she is, and she's willing to accept me 100%. And that goes a long way, because then you can have some really deep level trust when it comes to communication. You can feel that you can open up, and of course, communication is really at the center of it all. So, that's what I would say is to have a feeling of openness and mutual acceptance. That goes a long way.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. I mean, because you're two different people getting together, and if you're getting into a relationship with judgment and based on what you feel and maybe your belief system, I mean, that can derail a relationship pretty quickly. So I think that's really awesome. Yeah. So, and then just to share a little bit about why I'm doing this podcast is that I'm a single person. And I got to a point where I got frustrated, and, maybe one might say that I am not patient enough to wait to meet the one. So I wanted to hear from both of you, one from you, Terry, a guy's perspective, and then from Rosalie, from the woman's perspective, in terms of what would you say to somebody like me who is searching for that one?
Well, I think that the big thing, I mean, I don't want to go too big and get out of control here, but I think that women especially have a pressure on them. We're programmed from an early age, from when we're little girls, that basically your whole goal in life is to end up with a partner, because you're supposed to, find a man, or, nowadays a woman, whatever, find a partner and have some kids. And it's like a status symbol. And so when you are middle-aged, as I am, if you are unmarried, I probably get asked several times a year why I'm not married, because suddenly that's a big deal. And that's how I'm seen in the world. My marital status is kind of something people judge me on. I reject that, and it irritates the heck out of me, because I think that what it does is it has women, primarily more so than men, really focused on external goals, like achieving a certain relationship status. And I think that it also encourages women not to look inside themselves or to value every relationship you have. I have a lot of love in my life. Even as a single person before Terry was in my life, I had, there's friendships, there's family, there's coworkers, there's love everywhere, but we place such a, bounty on a romantic love, that I think that women often think the only love that matters is that of a mate.
Right.
So that's my soapbox. So I think that the best thing that a woman can do is not chase after anything or anyone. Mm-hmm. I think for me, Terry's the last person. I mean, let's look at how we know each other. He's the last person I thought was going to pop up in my life for a million reasons. One is he lives across the country. Right. But, I wasn't looking for a relationship with Terry, and I think I can speak for him. He wasn't with me either, but we just started experiencing a beautiful connection, and we just kind of let it go from there. So I would say, as a woman who's not attached in the world, I would say, really get to know yourself, mm-hmm. get to know what's important to you.
Right.
And you will kind of not notice that there's not a romantic partner sitting right next to you. And that tends to be, I hate to say it, but kind of when all of a sudden someone pops up and you think, oh, let me check this out. So that's my big soapbox rant. But I would say chasing is not the way. You want to really dig yourself. And then the people that are surrounding you will be people you dig as well. And who knows what the connections can be, but, love doesn't have to be a certain way. It doesn't have to be romantic. It doesn't have to be a partnership. It can take all kinds of forms. And so I think if we don't shut ourselves down to that and we just stay open, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And you kind of spoke to some of the things that I experienced as a single person in my 40s. And I got married one time, got divorced, and then, been on and off dating since then. And I don't have kids. So people look at me and they go, you're so beautiful, or you're so educated, or, whatever that label they put on me. And then they ask me, like, why aren't you married? You can't find anybody? It's really coming from a place of concern. But at the same time, and then the other thing is, like, you don't have kids. You never wanted to have kids. I get where it's coming from, and I respect that. But at the same time, when you're hearing it from all different angles, it just, to me, it's heartbreaking, right? Because I feel like maybe I haven't quite satisfied what everybody is expecting of me. And, and then it just becomes this, I started to say, poor me, And
I think it's important that, I reject it in my life. I don't think that I attach my status in the world as, what my relationship is based on. But I have grown women friends who are my age and older, mm-hmm. who are actually kind of, I don't know if it's jealousy or what, but there's kind of a pissiness, like a competition, like, there is a thing that exists where women really don't want to see other women happy. And it's like, they're more comfortable with me when I'm the single mom in the group, or when I'm, this or that. And it's like, I'm not buying into that crud anymore. I just, I'm making choices in my life that make sense to me. And it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. It's not like I had an easy road to get here. You have to do a lot of, I think, self-discovery.
Oh, yeah.
You have to commit that you are number one, not your partner. I mean, I hate to say that, but you have to feel whole and complete, yourself, because partners come and go. I mean, that's just how it is. People leave, people get sick, people, whatever. So I think the most important relationship is really with yourself. And, I got to the point where I just pretty much tell people, if they ask me why I'm not married, I'll turn around and say, well, why are you married? Ew.
Yeah, we've all made that decision anyway.
That is so funny. Okay, so what about you, Terry, from your perspective?
Well, from the male perspective, I think Rosalie's really onto something, and she calls me a unicorn. So, take this for what it's worth. But I never wanted to live a life that was defined externally.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to find a partner who said, let's live this life together, and who cares what anybody else thinks. So,
Right.
One of the things I found so attractive in Rosalie was she was like, I don't care what anybody thinks. I like you, you like me, let's make this work. The marriage that I was in previously, I always felt that there were so many other external influences. We had to do certain things. We had to be a certain way and to live a certain lifestyle. And, I wanted to give up on that pressure. So, what I'm looking for in my life right now is somebody who thinks I'm pretty cool, and I want to be with somebody that I think is pretty cool personally. And then you kind of create your own context and make
Right.
it work. So, I think that's where we're headed, and that's what I liked so much about Rosalie is she belonged to herself first. So.
Oh, I love that very much. I really love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I mean, I've never met you both in person, but I can definitely tell that there's some really strong love between the two of you. And again, I want to thank you both so, so much for being a part of my podcast and sharing your love story. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Do you have a love story to share? Do you know a couple with a love story? Send me an email at info@realloverealstories.com. And also follow me on Instagram and Facebook under Real Love Real Stories. Till next time.